The next question I want to address is one raised by Elizabeth Beatty. And she asked, what is an example of an open organization? And she writes, I'm struggling with the idea of an open organization. I am most familiar with rational organizations, have some understanding of natural organizations, but open organizations are not a familiar concept to me. Does anyone have an example of an open organization that could help me visualize? So a variety of you answered, and it was interesting, the responses. Mahesh Masurkar wrote that, an open organization is an organization open to anyone who agrees to abide by its purposes and principles with complete transparency and clearly defined decision-making structures, ownership patterns, and exchange mechanisms, designed, defined, and refined by all members as part of the continual transformative process. So access is open, and everybody kind of voluntarily participates. Brian Schenker expands on this and talks about open source software like Linux and Red Hat and Debian and those kind of things, where individuals contribute and access is such that everybody can volunteer. Brian Schenker also talks about this with the Free Software Foundation and a variety of the same companies that were just mentioned. And then Maria says, well, the organizational structure is different in particular. It's not just that it's access and that people volunteer and that it has this technology kind of focus, but that there's a flatness to the communication and interactions are horizontal, that there's low specialization, knowledge resides wherever it is most useful, and there's decentralization, right? And she goes on to say that these are open organizations. So these are all viable in terms of an organization that's more open and porous, right? I think that's fair. These are notions of the boundary of the organization being kind of obscured and basically more participants can access, right? I think those are all consistent. What I would answer maybe is a little different. The context of the question was compared to rational and natural organizations, but those are really perspectives on organization, in the sense that rational systems view are it's a particular view of organizations, that they are hierarchical, that they you have a strong leadership administrative unit, rational decision making and the like. And natural systems are ones that are more organic in terms of how they operate internally, with lots of contingencies where things emerge. There's interrelationships that matter. An informal organization matters more than formal. Those kinds of aspects are more of a natural system perspective. The open system perspective, not open organization necessarily, is one that views the environment as the key factor in guiding organizational behavior internally. So the focus is on it views the organization as an open system because the environment has such an impact on the organization. And here you have views of fields of organizations that are buffeted around by other companies. So you have concerns about resource dependencies between firms, coordination across them, up and down supply chains. You have even concerns with being legitimate in the wider cultural environment. That a firm views the concern like a school can't just look like a military program. It has to look like a school to some extent or a great extent in order to secure students, or it would be viewed as illegitimate or inappropriate by the environment. So we have those kinds of views. So the open system view is distinctive in that it prioritizes and highlights the environment's effect on the organization. So I think it's true that there are open organizations, and I think the characterization of them as open access and flat, kind of like World of Warcraft that we'll learn about later in the course, and Debian's a great example too. A lot of these companies that are online, they're terrific. Like is Stack Overflow, is that a open organization to some extent? Perhaps. But the open system view is slightly distinct in that it's a perspective on organizations and organizing and what matters. It highlights and emphasizes certain features in the environment as the most crucial. And that's a perspective in organizational theory and explanation that Dick Scott was trying to highlight. And that's why you got this rational, natural, and open perspectives.